Welcome back to the Manor. Julian McBain here, and we are in migration. Actually, so far it's been a pretty good migration. Why did you just jump to the other one when you know that someone else is shooting it, even though I had this one in line of sight? Please don't do that. Got something kind of interesting I want to talk about today, but before we get started, if you're new to the channel, welcome to the Manor. Please take a moment and subscribe down below. We are on the road to 13 million subscribers, one subscription at a time, so make sure you subscribe. Also, please consider going to patreon.com/JulianMcBain if you want to support my work. If you do, you will get exclusive content. In June, I released my only Patreon non-exclusive video, which is showing you the kind of content that I make for my Patreon. Please feel free to check that out. It's kind of like a preview. And I will be making July's exclusive video in the coming weeks, so consider subscribing. Or I should say, becoming a member. Okay. So, recently I read a book about conflict resolution, and it was actually a very enlightening read. Okay? And one of the things I read in there is that when trying to resolve a conflict, whether it's long running or short, or you're having troubles, one of the things you need to do is you need to be willing to take responsibility for your part in the conflict, which is something a lot of us don't do, including myself. Like, I'm as guilty of this as anyone. I love a good debate. Love a good debate. I think that's part of the reason why I'm a sports fighter, is I feel, to a certain extent, it's that conflict that I feel helps me grow. But there's a time and a place for that kind of conflict, and in sports fighting, the purpose is to win, just like in any conflict, but the purpose is not to hurt the other person, which is so often the case in conflict. So as I was reading and I was going through this book, what the hell was it called? I think it's Managing Everyday Conflict, or I mentioned it on my previous video. Doesn't matter. As I'm reading through it and I'm going through, and one of the things it mentions is that before you can make a sincere apology to someone and own your piece of it, you have to forgive any wrong that was done to you by that person regarding the issue. Or at least make your best attempt. And you have to let go of the resentment that you hold. And that kind of hit me like a hammer, because in my life I have gone through many conflicts. We all do. And some of them I've been able to forgive, and some of them I still hold on to. And I'm not necessarily proud of the ones that I hold on to. In fact, I'm not. But there are some things that I have a hard time letting go. And we all do, right? There are going to be some things that are kind of like lines in the sand. People will cross them, and then it's just, they have to make the first move. The ball's in their court. And so I was thinking about it. I was going through, and something happened last year regarding interpersonal associations. Someone I am indirectly affiliated with said something completely over the line, and because of my hesitation to say something, because it was to the point where I was shocked into silence, right? Which is no excuse. It's just that's basically what happened. Is that I was so shocked by the event, I didn't know how to react, and I broke one of my own rules. Which one of my own rules is, when in doubt, take an action. If you made a mistake, you can always apologize. But the worst action you can take is not to take any action. Because in my youth, I would default to doing nothing. And the results of doing nothing caused a decade-long schism between myself and my family. No joke, it was that long. I literally moved 2,000 miles away. Now, that wasn't the only reason I moved. It was just a contributing factor. The fact of the matter is that it was right after the crash, and the Midwest was a hell of a lot more affordable than Vermont was at the time. Actually, that's still the case. But in any event, that was a contributing factor, and it lasted a decade. And so it wasn't until the family suffered a tragedy that we were able to finally release the old resentments and actually try to put things back together again. And we did. I'm not going to go into the circumstances of the whole thing because that part is unnecessary, but in order for me to forgive them, in order for me to apologize to them, I had to forgive them their part. And I had to take responsibility for my part in it. And so that's something I still struggle with, and I didn't realize that that's what had happened. But that's what happened, is I took responsibility for my part in what happened. And so I was talking to one of the people involved and the other day, and you know, I went to them and I said, well, it was on the phone, and I'm like, so regarding this incident, I want to take responsibility and ownership for the things that I did that caused this conflict to arise between us. And I laid out my part in it, the part that I felt I was responsible for. And I apologized. And I said, this is a partial apology. I'm trying to formulate the rest, but I wanted you to know that I'm taking ownership of my part. And they were very gracious about it. They were very gracious about it. And I learned more about the situation that I didn't know. There were more factors involved that I was unaware of. And so when dealing with conflict, remember that conflict is often multifaceted, and you won't always know all of the factors involved. Things may seem to be very cut and dry, but they rarely are. You know, I was having a conversation with a friend a couple of weeks ago, and we were talking about viewing the world as either black and white, or a world that the world that we live in is many shades of gray. And the fact of the matter is that nothing in life is black and white. It's all shades of gray. We live in a very gray world. Some of those grays are lighter, some of them are darker, some of them are muddled, some of them are hard to see through. And so we have to be willing to understand that what we do may affect more facets than we expect them to. And that hit me rather hard as I'm reading through the book, and it says you have to take responsibility for your part and be willing to do so even if they aren't able to. Now, there does come a point they're going to have to be willing to take responsibility for their part, and if they're refusing to, you take responsibility for your bit and you walk away. And that's okay too, because you did your part in things, right? And it doesn't mean it's going to be easy, and it doesn't mean it's not going to hurt. But it's for lack of a better term, it's a form of soul care for yourself, right? Because by taking responsibility, you are empowering yourself. You are empowering yourself by saying, I see the part that I had to play in this, and for that, I accept responsibility for it, and I will do better to be a better person. And I think that's something that a lot of people have lost. Not everyone, not by a long shot, but I see in life, and this is very indicative of my generation, and again, it's not universal. I know a lot of people who aren't like this, but a lot of people in my generation, I'm an older millennial. I was born in 84, so I got to see the end of the Cold War, still be under nuclear threat, and then go through 2 full crashes as an adult. Fun times. There is a need in my generation for some reason to abdicate responsibility. And I understand the draw of it. You know, it's like, this isn't my fault, this is someone else's fault, or there's nothing we can do about it. It's almost a nihilistic tendency. And to a certain extent, I get it. I mean, we were handed a pretty rough deal. But the fact of the matter is that some things you just got to learn to play with the cards you're dealt. And the only way things get better is if you take the hand you're dealt, you accept responsibility for the things that you can change, and truck through as best you can. And, you know, I made mistakes along the way, and some of them were not my fault, but they are certainly my responsibility to correct. And this is something that I realized that this is also plays into the conflict resolution, is that what happened was not my fault, but it was my responsibility to do something about it, and I failed. Right? Someone said something egregious. I have no control over what that person said, but it was my responsibility to say something about it, and I failed to say anything. And so that is something that I have had to contend with. And so, and other places, like when I went to college, I took out a bunch of loans because I was told that the best way to make it in life, and the only way I was going to make it anywhere in life, was to go to college, which of course was patently false. So I took out loans based on bad advice. Is that my fault? Technically, no, but it is my responsibility to pay them back. And so that's the difference. It is my fault that I selected a really bad major to go into. Actually, it was a really good major, except it's extremely dependent on having a strong economy. So I actually went into aviation flight operations in college, and so that's learning to fly. That's learning the science of flight and becoming a pilot with the full knowledge of how everything is operating, not just getting your basic pilot's license or doing it the old-fashioned way where it's more like trade school, which is still very expensive, but learning all the science behind the flight as you're doing the flight as well, and doing fun things like designing drop launch systems for rockets off of Cessna 172s. But I made 2 mistakes in that one. One is I didn't finish. Otherwise circumstances, I tried to compact too many things in my life into the same period of time, because I had spent the first few years after high school doing dumb things, and so I tried to make up for them while also beginning my adult life. And so that made it so I couldn't finish. And because of that, I ended up graduating with an associate's that has minimally helped me get jobs. I think the associates helped me move into the industry I'm in, but I could have gotten an associate's with a much more focused major at a much cheaper rate than I did. If I had been more focused and actually done what I should have done, and that's the responsibility that I take. Sorry, I'm tangenting really bad, but in solving that conflict and taking responsibility for the part that I'm responsible for, I have found myself to feel more empowered, because I understand that I have control over what's going on. I have control over my life. And it doesn't matter what other outside factors are out there. I am not going to allow them to take over my life. I'm not going to allow them to stop me from accomplishing the goals I have. And some of those goals are going to be tougher to accomplish because I made mistakes. And that might be the same for you. You might have goals that you really want to accomplish, and it looks like they are impossible. It's not that they're impossible for the most part. I mean, for example, I wanted to repair my relationship with my brother, and that's no longer possible because he passed away. But in most cases, there is still a path to make it to achieve what it is you wish to achieve, even if you aren't able to achieve it in the manner in which you originally planned to achieve it. And so what the goal is, what the idea is that you have to figure out, okay, this was my plan and this is how I plan to achieve it. I made a mistake and that path is no longer open to me. And so now I've got to find another path. And everyone's path is going to look different. I would encourage everyone to look up the story Miles in the Night. It's a fantastic short story. The whole read will probably take you 5 to 7 minutes. And it talks about where different people are along the path. Some stop for a break and they stay there a long time. Others take the path that's laid out through the woods, and others decide to hack their way through the vegetation. And it really encapsulates all of these things. But the most important thing that it shows, the most important message it gives, is that each of those people is taking responsibility for their own lives and living them in a manner that they feel is right for them. And so when that piece of the conflict resolution, I read it in that book, Resolving Everyday Conflict, that's the name of the book. When I was reading that book and I came across that, it was a light bulb moment, because I was like, oh my God, this is the piece I've been missing. I've touted, take responsibility for yourself and, put yourself together, lay a foundation, and build the life around yourself that you want to build. And I totally missed the fact that part of that is owning your piece of conflict. And where possible, to operate outside of conflict, right? Because conflict isn't inherently good. We test ourselves with conflict. That's what sports fighters do. That's what I do. I am a sports fighter. I love to sports fight. I will probably sports fight until the day my body tells me there's no way in hell I can sports fight anymore. And then I'll get hurt because I'll try doing it anyway because I'm a knucklehead. But when I read that, I'm like, oh my God, this is the piece I've been missing. This is the piece that I have not been able to figure out about resolving this. And it was very enlightening. And so I hope that, my hope is that as you proceed to build your life around you, when you run into conflict, you're able to find the things that you are responsible for in that conflict and take ownership and go to the person you're in conflict with and say, I want you to know that I understand that this, and this was my responsibility, and I apologize. And in that way, there's a good chance the other person will apologize too at that point. Some of them won't. Some of them won't, for whatever reason, whether it's they're not ready to, maybe they don't see their part of the conflict, because that's a thing. They might not be ready. They might not be mature enough. This is especially true if you're talking with children. They may not be psychologically able to handle that yet, which is unfortunate, but is very common, especially in my generation. But if they aren't willing to do that, at least say your piece and be willing to walk away. Give them the opportunity. And don't accuse. If you have to do it from a place of total forgiveness, because if you haven't forgiven them, the apology is probably going to come off as insincere. But But if you are able to forgive them their piece in it, even before they've admitted their piece, you can go to them, make a sincere apology, and then if necessary, walk away. Because at least you have done what you can. And it's not always going to work. You know? It won't always work. And that's unfortunate. But people are human. And humans are flawed beings. And sometimes we can't... Sometimes we allow our pride and our ego to overtake our common sense, our good sense. And that's basically what conflict is. You know, it's interesting. I've recently made some changes in my life that have helped me to better understand myself and better understand how my own brain works and why I made some of the mistakes I made. And it's hard. Introspection is hard because it's painful to see the parts of ourselves that are broken or don't function the way that they should, or to review the things we did that were wrong and take responsibility for it. But I've also found it very empowering because Dan Locke said it best. When you say it's not my fault, what you're really saying is I am powerless. I'm going to say that again. When you say it's not my fault or not my responsibility, I think that's a better way to put it. When it's not my responsibility, what you're saying is I am powerless. When you say it's my responsibility or it's my fault, you're saying I am powerful. Because you're taking the responsibility that you can for the event that happened to you. And I think I'm going to leave you with that. We're going to take down this long tooth. I'm going to get to a safe distance, and then I'll do the outro. Thank you for sticking around if you're still here. This has been kind of an interesting episode, I know. But sometimes when I turn the recorder on and I just start talking, it's more philosophical, and sometimes it hits closer to home, and today's just happened to hit closer to home. So thank you so much. Thank you for watching. Thank you for listening. Please like, share, and subscribe down below. We are on the road to 13 million subscribers, one subscription at a time, so make sure you subscribe. And as always, I really appreciate the support, and we will see you in the next one.